I never imagined my life would take this turn. A real estate bidding war with Karen Wilkins, the president of our homeowners association? That kind of drama belonged in TV shows or courtroom thrillers, not in Oak Ridge Estates, a place designed to look and feel like a perpetual Sunday afternoon. But there I was, standing in the back of a packed community center, clutching a bidding paddle, facing down the woman who had turned my peaceful life into a year-long siege. And it all started with a tomato plant. My name is Alex. I'm a high school math teacher, an avid gardener, and, until 6 months ago, a content, rule-abiding resident of Oak Ridge Estates, a picturesque subdivision in the suburbs. The streets were named after trees, the lawns were clipped to perfection, and the houses looked so similar you could mistake one for another in the fog. Everything about Oak Ridge screamed harmony and order. And yet, beneath that veneer of suburban tranquility lurked a small-time tyrant with a penchant for control, a hunger for power, and a binder full of regulations she wielded like scripture. Karen Wilkins, HOA president, enforcer, gatekeeper of lawn color schemes, mailbox heights, and flower pot materials. She had turned our neighborhood into her own private fiefdom, and most people, too tired, too busy, or just too afraid, let her get away with it. Until I didn't. The irony wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. Karen's corner-lot mansion was a monster of a house, more suited to a gated community than our modest subdivision. It had been grandfathered in somehow, a mystery approved by a previous board filled with her old tennis partners and cousins. Her property violated more HOA guidelines than I could count. The fence was 8 inches too high, her garage had a visible extension that hadn't been approved, and her pool house wasn't even listed on official records. Still, Karen acted as if her word was gospel. If someone painted their shutters the wrong shade of beige, they'd get a notice within 24 hours. If someone's lawn got a little brown during a heat wave, a fine would soon follow. I had moved in 3 years earlier. At the welcome event, she approached me like a politician working a campaign trail, smiling too much, eyes scanning me with quiet judgment. "Welcome to Oak Ridge Estates," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. She handed me a 3-ring binder the size of an encyclopedia. "This is our HOA handbook. I suggest you read it cover to cover before you even think about planting a flower or changing your mailbox." I remember the chill that crawled up my spine. There was something unsettling about her, like she got a little too much pleasure from enforcing rules no one else cared about. I thanked her politely, went home, and read the handbook. Every single page. Back then, I thought it was just a quirk of the neighborhood. Every community has a Karen, right? I had no idea she'd eventually try to take my home from me over a garden. It started with a simple project, something wholesome. I decided to install a vegetable garden in my front yard. Not a haphazard mess of soil and vines, mind you. Raised cedar beds, carefully spaced. Decorative fencing. Gravel pathways. Tomatoes, bell peppers, herbs. It was a source of joy, especially after a long day of wrangling equations and hormonal teenagers. And according to the HOA handbook, yes, that massive tome, there was nothing explicitly prohibiting vegetable gardens, as long as landscaping remained neat and consistent with the neighborhood aesthetic. Mine did. In fact, I got compliments. Neighbors would wave and ask for fresh tomatoes. One even brought me zucchini bread as a thank you. Then came the notice. Taped to my front door in bold red lettering, "Unauthorized agricultural activity in violation of Section 8.4. I read it 3 times. Then I pulled out my handbook. Section 8.4 was a vague paragraph about appropriate landscaping. It mentioned ornamental plants, encouraged uniformity, and discouraged neglect or clutter. But nothing about vegetables. I thought it had to be a mistake. So I called the HOA office. And of course, Karen answered. "Oh, Alex," she said, her voice laced with condescension. "Yes, we've received several complaints. The board has determined that vegetable gardens are not appropriate for front yards. They're unsightly. They disrupt the harmony of the neighborhood. You have 7 days to remove it or face a fine." "But the rules don't say anything about vegetables," I argued. "And it's well maintained." "The board has made its decision," she said coldly. "And we've documented the complaints. You'll need to comply." She hung up before I could ask who exactly had complained. I looked out the window at my little green patch of pride. It wasn't just a garden anymore. It was a challenge. And I wasn't backing down. I attended the next HOA board meeting, determined to defend myself. I brought photos of the garden, copies of the handbook, and even a signed letter from 3 neighbors praising the garden's upkeep and aesthetics. The meeting was held in the community center, a beige box of a building with flickering fluorescent lights and folding chairs that smelled faintly of mildew. As I walked in, the room grew quiet. Karen sat at the center of the table, flanked by 4 board members. I recognized 2 of them from her weekly bridge games. "We're here to discuss the unauthorized vegetable garden at 684 Maple Drive," Karen said, not even looking at me. "No, hello, Alex." No acknowledgement of my presence as anything other than a rule breaker. I calmly presented my case. I laid out the handbook. I showed photos of how neat and aesthetically appropriate the garden was. I pointed out that the handbook didn't mention vegetables anywhere. I offered the neighbor letters. Karen didn't even blink. When I finished, she cleared her throat. "Thank you for your input. Let's move to a vote. All in favor of requiring the removal of the vegetable garden at 684 Maple Drive?" Karen's hand shot up. Then 2 more. Then 1 more. Only Mr. Peterson, the oldest board member and a retired contractor, abstained. "The motion passes," Karen declared, almost gleefully. "You have 14 days to remove the garden and return the yard to its original state. Failure to comply will result in a $100 per day fine." My mouth was dry. I felt the blood rushing to my ears. But I also felt something else. Resolve. This wasn't over. Not even close. I went home and called my lawyer, a calm, methodical man who specialized in HOA disputes. After reviewing the documents, he told me exactly what I wanted to hear. They can't retroactively enforce a rule that doesn't exist. There's no specific prohibition. We can challenge this. He drafted a firm, detailed letter citing state law, pointing out the vagueness of Section 8.4 and warning of legal consequences if they continued with the fines or threats. I slept better that night. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the system might work. Then Karen struck again. Rather than backing down, she convened an emergency HOA meeting. Within 10 days, the board voted to amend the handbook. The new rule: no food-producing plants are allowed in front-facing yards. Clear as crystal. The change would take effect in 30 days. Which meant, technically, my garden was still legal. For now. But that's not what Karen was counting on. She was playing a longer game. A dirtier one. She started watching me. Closely. And that's when she found the opening she needed. A missed HOA dues payment. After reading the foreclosure notice, I didn't panic. Not right away. First, I sat down at my kitchen table, garden soil still on my jeans, and read the letter again. Every line, every clause. It was designed to intimidate. Designed to break people. But I wasn't people. I was a teacher. A planner. A fighter when cornered. I called my lawyer again. This time, the tone was more serious. He explained that HOAs in our state did indeed have the power to foreclose on homes over unpaid dues, even small amounts, if left unchecked. But we had a few weeks. Enough time to fight back. Enough time to destroy Karen's whole house of cards. So I went to work. First, I filed a formal legal challenge with the county court disputing the validity of the lien. Then I submitted a request for discovery, every internal HOA document, vote, complaint, and record related to my case. Second, I contacted my local news station. Not the big national one, just the scrappy team that did stories on potholes and stolen lawn gnomes. I gave them everything: photos of my garden, the ridiculous notices, a copy of the rulebook before and after the amendment, and a scanned copy of Karen's own code-violating pool house. They ate it up. Teacher faces foreclosure over tomatoes, aired 2 days later. It got picked up by 3 more stations. People started emailing me, texting, dropping by the house just to say they were rooting for me. The tide was turning. But Karen, she wasn't rattled. She escalated. A week after the story broke, Karen went door to door handing out clarification flyers to residents. I got one too, left under a rock on my porch. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. glossy paper, official HOA letterhead, and a photo of my garden that somehow made it look overgrown and chaotic. The headline read, "The Truth About the Garden, What the Media Isn't Telling You." It accused me of violating multiple guidelines, hiding from dues, and encouraging the spread of agricultural pests. Yes, pests. Worse, it claimed I was stirring up division in a peaceful community and bringing negative attention to our neighborhood. Classic Karen. When she couldn't win with rules, she waged war with lies. For the first time, I started to feel the social pressure. A few neighbors who used to wave stopped making eye contact. One mom even pulled her kid away from my sidewalk chalk math games. I thought about quitting, about tearing up the garden, paying the fines, letting it go. But every time I looked out that window, every time I saw that flash of green and red in the sun, I remembered why I started. This wasn't about vegetables. This was about control. Then came the breakthrough. My lawyer called one night with a new voice in the background, a woman named Melissa, a forensic accountant and HOA watchdog. She'd read about my case and offered her services pro bono. She started digging, and what she found changed everything. "Alex," she said on a Zoom call, her screen filled with spreadsheets and bank statements, "Karen's been funneling HOA funds to a shell landscaping company owned by her nephew. Over $30,000 in maintenance fees over the past 2 years. No records of actual work. No invoices from legitimate vendors. Just checks signed and deposited." Worse, the HOA had quietly settled a lawsuit 2 years prior with a resident who'd also challenged Karen, someone who'd mysteriously moved out right after. The details had been sealed under NDA, but the payout was in the books, $42,000. I felt my pulse pounding. I knew she was dirty, but this was criminal. We compiled everything into a file and handed it over to a contact at the district attorney's office. Within a week, they launched an investigation. Quiet at first, but it was growing. Karen didn't know yet, but the ground beneath her was cracking. Word spreads fast in a cul-de-sac. Once whispers of an investigation reached the residents, people began talking, then murmuring, then rallying. I started getting knocks on my door from folks who once ignored me. She threatened to fine us for wind chimes. She told my kid's lemonade stand was a zoning violation. She tried to evict a couple over a basketball hoop. Everyone had a story, and now they had someone to rally behind. I organized a community meeting, without the HOA's blessing. We held it at the park pavilion, and to my surprise, over 30 people showed up. I didn't rant. I didn't yell. I laid out the facts. Karen's abuse of power. The shady finances, the intimidation tactics, the weaponization of rules to control and punish. Then I handed out petition forms to force a vote of no confidence, to dissolve the current HOA board, to start fresh with bylaws that protected homeowners, not punished them. By the end of the night, I had 27 signatures. Karen called an emergency board meeting the next morning. She didn't smile this time. She scowled like a queen watching her castle collapse. I had just begun to celebrate when another letter arrived. From the county. This one wasn't from Karen, it was official. Despite the lien being under legal dispute, the foreclosure auction had been scheduled, thanks to a loophole Karen exploited with the county clerk's office. 30 days. That was all the time I had before my house, my home, would go on the block. I called my lawyer, enraged. He filed an emergency injunction. But even with that, the auction might go forward unless a judge intervened quickly. But Karen had made a mistake. She thought I'd run. Instead, I prepared to bid on my own home. I borrowed money from family, from savings, from a neighborhood legal defense fund that had popped up overnight. People were willing to donate to keep me in the fight. I showed up at the auction in a pressed suit, standing tall in the sun outside the county courthouse. And that's when I saw her, Karen, standing at the edge of the crowd, holding a bidding paddle, smirking. She wanted to buy my house, flip it, claim victory. That was the moment I realized just how far she'd go. This wasn't about rules, or landscaping, or even power. It was personal. She wanted to ruin me. So I did the only thing left to do. I outbid her. 2 weeks after the auction, I found myself in a courtroom facing the woman who had made my life hell. Karen sat smugly at the defendant's table, flanked by a nervous-looking HOA attorney and a corporate real estate lawyer. She still wore her signature pastel blazer and a pin with the HOA logo, as if it were a badge of honor. Across the aisle, I sat beside my attorney, and Melissa, our numbers warrior. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, had reviewed the emergency injunction and was ready to hear both sides. I was the first to speak. I told my story, not just about the garden. I told the judge about the intimidation, the lies, the financial manipulation, and the abuse of power that extended well beyond me. I handed over the documents, every fake violation notice, every altered bylaw, every check written to her nephew's landscaping company. Then Melissa took the floor. She walked the court through line after line of the HOA's budget, pointing out inconsistencies, patterns, shell accounts, and finally, payments that could not be accounted for. By the time she finished, Karen was visibly sweating. Her lawyer kept whispering to her, probably begging her to settle. But it was too late. The judge declared the lien against my home invalid and ordered the HOA to pay all legal fees related to the case. Then came the hammer drop. The judge referred the matter to the county's Financial Crimes Division. Karen tried to stand up and object. The judge told her to sit down. The news hit the community like a lightning bolt. HOA president under criminal investigation for embezzlement and abuse of power. The headline made the front page of the local paper and trended on social media for a full week. Neighbors who had once feared Karen were suddenly emboldened. Several of them came forward with sworn affidavits detailing her harassment, including threats of fines, discriminatory remarks, and retaliation for questioning her authority. The county launched a full audit of the HOA's records. Then the sheriff's office arrived, with warrants. Karen was arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and misconduct in public office. As she was led out of her home in cuffs, reporters snapped photos. That smug smirk had finally vanished. The rest of the board resigned within days. And just like that, Karen's kingdom fell. But the victory didn't feel sweet. Not yet. Not until something better rose in its. We held elections the following month. Not in the shadows or at a golf club bar, but at the public library auditorium, where every homeowner had a voice. I didn't run for president. I didn't want the power. I just wanted balance. I ran for the governance committee, and won. But the real victory was watching neighbors, once strangers, step up. A retired veteran who just wanted peace. A single mom who knew how to stretch a dollar and read a budget. A tech-savvy college kid who offered to digitize all the HOA records and make them fully transparent. We rewrote the bylaws, line by line. We added protections for homeowners, a clause forbidding conflicts of interest, and, most important, a right to garden. We called it the Green Clause. I laminated a copy and planted it at the edge of my garden, next to the cherry tomatoes. Summer rolled in like honey sunlight. My garden bloomed brighter than ever. Not just vegetables anymore. Flowers, herbs, and even a birdbath, donated by a neighbor who once avoided me like I had the plague. People stopped by, asked questions, took tomatoes home. Kids came by for basil to take to their parents. One girl even drew a chalk sign on my driveway that said, "Miss Alex's garden makes the street smile." It made me smile. That patch of soil had once been my sanctuary. Then it became a battlefield. No. Now it was a symbol of resilience, of community, of what happens when one voice refuses to stay quiet, no matter how loud the gavel. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Karen's trial began in the fall, and I testified on the first day. She didn't look at me once. She was eventually convicted of multiple counts of fraud and misconduct, sentenced to 2 years of house arrest, a lifetime ban from HOA positions, and a hefty fine, money that went directly back into the community budget. That winter, I gave a talk at a regional homeowners conference about how to prevent power abuse in HOAs. My story spread across forums and Facebook groups nationwide. I started getting letters from people in Texas, Ohio, California, all fighting their own little dictators. Some of them called me an inspiration. But I wasn't a hero. I was just a woman who wanted to grow tomatoes, who loved her home, who refused to back down. And in doing so, I'd helped tear down a bully's regime. The real hero was the idea that no matter how small your voice feels, when you're rooted in truth and nourished by courage, it can grow into something powerful. Something untouchable. Something unstoppable. Just like a garden.